Greetings, welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the Aquarius full moon, which occurs worldwide on the 9th of August. I will share with you shortly the exact timings in all the major cities of the world. But it occurs just under 17 degrees in the sign of Aquarius, so it's in the second decan, therefore sub-ruled by Mercury. Very much to do with fast communication. Now, some astrologers, some very notable astrologers, say that Mercury is accidentally exalted in the sign of Aquarius, and I would agree with that. So we can expect our intellects to be stimulated by this particular lunation. It provides a backdrop for the next 2 weeks. It is when the sun and the moon are in opposition, so they're not unified like in the new moon, and of course the sky is lit up. But what makes this particularly interesting is the median black moon Lilith is in a T-square with the sun in the proud Leo and the moon in the sign of the people, the collective of Aquarius. And deep in the subterranean Scorpio, it suggests that when it comes to our love life, our friendships, our future direction, or where we showcase our individual talents, there can be some very intense drives that do interact with our decision making over this next fortnight. Now, concurrent to that, of course, we've got the two rulers of the sign of Aquarius in a relationship with the deep and transformational Pluto just at the start of the sign in the first 2.5 degrees, which has an extra dimension of Aquarius because it's the first dward or first 12th harmonic. So that brings more Aquarius resonance, and that Saturn, despite its retrograde and despite it being opposite Mars, is also linking back to Uranus, the modern ruler of the sign of Aquarius, and they're both linking to that Pluto. So we have back to Mars a grand air trine, which I feel is going to see people want to find their voices, because we've had an awful lot of forceful, abrasive, authoritarian, ruthless behaviour that has been deployed on personkind over the last 6 months in particular. And I feel that people are going to start to find their voices, because remember, Pluto is the planet which is about the collective, but the sign of Aquarius is very much about the voice of the collective. Now, the other thing that can come up is the new moon, which occurred on the 24th of July in Leo, was opposite Pluto. So whatever we wanted to manifest at that point in terms of our individual talent, flair, creativity, and what we wanted in terms of our personal desires, had to in some ways overcome the powerful energy of Pluto, which could be hidden opposition, it may be power battles, it may be some of our own inner blockages. So as we reach this juncture of this full moon, which does influence the next 2 weeks so potently, I think we just need to be mindful that we're in a time when the sky is arranged in a way we've never experienced before. Huge opportunity, Mars, Uranus, Pluto, grand trine, delicious. And we also have Saturn and Neptune in their retrogrades in a direct opposition with Mars. The significance of that, so both the malefics are on bad terms. So, and also we have Mars detrimented in Libra and Saturn in its fall in the sign of Aries. So that's the big picture. I'm going to unpack all of this for you. I'm also going to share the event charts, because the natal event chart particularly is intriguing because it pictures the moon in house 5, very redolent of the sign of Leo, and the sun in house 11, very redolent of the sign of Aquarius. I'm also going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs towards the end of this video, from Aries through to Pisces, to give you a flavour of what you can expect over this next fortnight in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me, all your views and interactions. If you are new to the channel, please help it to thrive. Click that subscription button, but also the bell notification symbol too. I really appreciate all the support I get. If you're a member on YouTube, thank you. If you're a patron, thank you so much. But also, please visit my new website. We are evolving it the whole time. It's getting more traffic. We're refining it constantly. You can download your free natal chart, which has got an incredibly detailed interpretation. Enjoy the 3 free card tarot. I don't feel there's a better one out there. But also you can sign up for your free daily horoscope fired to your device each morning. Also, if you'd like to speak to me one-to-one, why not check out my testimonials? It's a very special part of what I do. I feel very honoured by what people say. You don't have to book a reading straight away, but please see the link below for more. So this event, this Sturgeon full moon, occurs across the 9th of August throughout the world. So on the screen now, all the major cities, starting with LA through Rio de Janeiro, based on London, Greenwich, Johannesburg, New Delhi, and last but very much not least, Sydney. It's at 16 degrees and 59, so just a tiny fraction under that 17th degree. And it is conjunct a fixed star called Rotanov. Now, Rotanov is not one of the more notable fixed stars like Sirius, Regulus, and so on, but it is about having a degree of sparkle and the mercurial abilities of this particular event, because it being in the second decan of Aquarius, I think is going to be amplified. So the downside with the moon in the mix is we can use our intellect, quick wits, and in terms of Aquariusness, perhaps unique zaniness to swerve looking at something that may be out of balance. Because for me, the tension we feel with a full moon is where we're not getting a good balance between the more masculine drive, and I don't mean this in terms of gender, the more masculine drive of the sun and the more receptive feeling sides of the moon. Also, the moon in Aquarius is more detached. I have the moon in Aquarius, and that means that people can be quite logical and observe things in a little bit of a different way. So we need to make sure that we stay connected to the humanity of the moon. That's very, very important. But what about that black moon Lilith position, the medium black moon Lilith position? So on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart from a natal perspective. It's a Virgo ascendant. The moon's in the 5th house, as I mentioned, the sun in the 11th. But look at the position of black moon Lilith in the deep subterranean Scorpio. That can be very much about desires and very much to do with hidden desires, and maybe whether it comes to choices we need to make about the friendships we have, maybe a romantic involvement, we could find ourselves lulled by that desire in a very potent way. So as much as Aquarius energy tends to celebrate individuality as well as the collective, and really promotes things like cooperation, collaboration, whilst not entirely giving away our identity, which is great. I think there's going to be some pulls, and then we have the Leo energy of the sun, and of course we still have Mercury in retrograde, which is very much about how we manifest I, whereas Aquarius energy is about how we manifest or connect we. If something's out of balance, so if we're too much people pleasing but losing our uniqueness, perhaps to have the confidence to be a bit zany, Aquarius, we need to think again. If, however, we're in a relationship and it's a bit stifling, we don't have enough free time or socialization with other people outside the relationship, Black Moon Lilith could provide some temptations over the next couple of weeks. But let's just check out that position of the Grand Air Trine. Mars is in the 1st house, so He may be said to be detrimented in Libra, but he's not detrimented in the first house. I actually feel that Mars in Libra, in terms of an essential dignity, needs to be challenged. Why do we just assume that Mercury in Sagittarius is weak, Jupiter in Gemini, and so on? Of course they have weaknesses, but they also have strengths. So Mars here is reminding us that it's important to firm up our boundaries, and if we need to be combative with people who are not taking us for, not showing us enough respect. So being a bit firmer about those boundaries and our defences. But also, if we want to bring someone into our world, it's going to give us the desire, the passion and the drive to go for it. Mars in the first house, and perhaps be in the moment rather than analysing it too much, which can be a Libran tendency. Then we have the position of Uranus in the ninth house. So here the truth seeker is really wanting the truth. Expect more stuff to tumble out into the public gaze, which has been hidden, which has been masked by power, and also power disguised as charm and charisma, Leo, because the collective, Aquarius, is demanding the truth. The modern ruler of Aquarius, Uranus, is about those higher truths. And then we have Pluto in the fifth house. So once again, a kind of Leo vibe, and that's to do with transformation, about how we play, how we create, and also how in a way we do find our identity in this fast changing, at times really quite challenging world we're living in. But look at the position of Saturn and Neptune. That's intriguing because they're in the seventh house. So relationships are going to be challenged. Fairness is the theme of this particular lunation. Yet some people could be tempted by the secret pulls of Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio, which could give us some intriguing choices. Do we stick? Do we twist? Who do we get pulled towards? That could be part of the theme. But I think Uranus in the ninth house says, as long as we stick to our personal philosophies, we lead our lives in a truthful and decent way as possible, we're going to gain from this particular lunation if we can get a better balance between where we need to get attention as an individual, Leo, but where we need to stay connected to others, Aquarius. So just briefly on the screen now, I'm showing the solar event chart. So there's Mars in 7, Saturn, Neptune in 1, and we have Uranus 3, Pluto in 11, and of course we have the Moon in 11 too. So that just gives us an idea that we can all collectively relate to. So which of the zodiac signs are going to be affected by this in the most impactful way? Well, Leo, Aquarius, the opposition, the polarity, but also Taurus and Scorpio, because they're on the square. So anyone who's got degrees from about 15 to 17, maybe 18 degrees, in any of those four signs will feel this, because it's on the angularity of the axes that cross. Now, in terms of how it will affect us all, I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, from Aries through to Pisces, to give you a flavour of what you can discover, what you can gain, but also what you may need to just gently navigate beyond over this next 2 weeks. Please stay with me for them, starting with Aries. So Aries, as this full moon occurs, the two malefics, including your ruler Mars, go face to face exactly. And of course, Saturn, the other malefic, is in your sign. So if there's some relationship politics playing out in your situation at the moment, the amount of time you spend with friends, perhaps in a romantic situation, feeling that you don't have enough time to socialise with other people, or the demands of your children may be closing in on you, or it could be about finance with Black Moon Lilith in the mix, or perhaps some of your deepest desires for your future hopes are not being met, not necessarily just in an intimate way. It could be other things that you're yearning for as well. I think it's true to say that over the next couple of weeks there could be some very important discussions and conversations. And of course Mercury, the planet of communication, is just still in retrograde. So for us all, choosing our words carefully, understanding that however much we want to set our boundaries, There could be some kind of limitation or frustration that we're experiencing. Now, a full moon can also push into the open something that we may be a little reluctant to look at, and it may be around someone in your network. Perhaps they're not quite as loyal, not quite as invested as you. Perhaps even a little bit of jealousy with Black Moon Lilith there as well. So all in all, over the next 2 weeks, finding that balance between where you spend your free time, your social time, is going to be a key. If things are a little bit out of trim, you're doing perhaps a little too much people pleasing, or perhaps a little too focused on your own needs, those are the things that could come up in conversations. But I feel if you are in a relationship of any kind, with a friend, within a group, in a partnership or at work, that isn't working so well, and you don't feel that you can express yourself comfortably and freely, the Sun in Leo, and it doesn't seem to work for your future hopes, I think you will have to address it seriously during this next fortnight. So Taurus, for you, the full moon occurs in your 10th house, which is very much to do with our connection to the world. But the moon in the 10th house can also see our feelings much closer to the surface. Now, when we're all feeling a bit more self-conscious and sensitive, that's when we think people can almost peer into where we are. Of course, that's not true of all people. Perhaps some very perceptive folks may pick up those signals. But for you, if you are feeling that your professional situation isn't quite working for you in terms of the emotional enjoyment, the environment's not great, you don't particularly feel that comfortable with your colleagues, it may be something you have to grapple with. And because Saturn and Neptune are in the very psychological 12th house, in an opposition with Mars in your 6th, if there is some politics or perhaps some scheming going on at work, it could be something that really does have an impact upon you at this time. You could also, with Pluto in the mix, be actively thinking about making some changes to your long-term plan. And that may require a degree of training. It could require you to go away from home, and that could dislocate the amount of time you want to spend with loved ones. If you do work from home, you may feel that the responsibilities and time that you spend beavering away can also impinge on just having that peace and tranquility that's so important for all of us, and essentially what the Sun in Leo is asking you to seek at the present time. So if you are going through some big transitions at work, you're not really enjoying it with the people you're working with, or your work-life balance is out of kilter, that's what you need to address over the next 2 weeks. But there could also be someone who you know through your family or even professionally, who you're finding a little bit intriguing in terms of the romantic dimension coming from Black Moon Lilith, and that can also put another angle into this potentially complex mix. I think the bottom line of this full moon for you is whatever you're thinking of doing in terms of your worldly moves, just make sure that you feel totally comfortable at a more spiritual and emotional level. So Gemini, for you, this full moon occurs in the 9th house, very much about expansion, travel, higher education, but it can also be around things like documentation, contracts, legal interactions. Now you have Pluto, the planet of transformation, in this area, forging a stunning alliance to Uranus in your sign and also Mars in Libra. If there is something you're really inspired by at this time and you want to share it with others, it may be a subject that you have a deep knowledge about, this could be an exciting 2-week period. But you do need to choose the way you articulate your message with a degree of care. Because of Black Moon Lilith being in the 6th house, in a T-square with the Sun in the 3rd, Moon in 9, that can see you potentially promise more than is realistically deliverable. Also because of the crunching opposition between Saturn and Neptune and Mars, there may also be a need to use language delicately around your friendship or romantic situation. Someone may not necessarily share your philosophies or vision, and that could come up in quite a pointed way over the next few weeks. Now, you could use the rebellious energies of Uranus, the thrust of Mars, and if you like, the knowledge of Pluto in order to have a very strong response. But you could win the argument but lose a friend. So if you are traveling anywhere, you're processing any documentation, filling any forms, making any kind of applications, you are talking to a solicitor or an attorney, it's really vital that you don't rush the process, that you do think very carefully about what the impact of your words or anything that you agree to could have for some time to come. But I think around your social or your romantic situation, care around language is important too. So Cancer, this particular full moon is very complicated. If you've got a big financial decision to make at the present time, and it may be because you're not enjoying a job, and with Mercury having been tracking backwards in your second house of everyday money, this may have been something you've been grappling with for a while. You're going to need to really get stuck in and deal with this once and for all over the next 2 weeks, because the full moon's in the 8th house. And that's the long-term financial position. It can be things like investment, saving, shared resources for sure, but also where we're most intimately invested. However, because Saturn and Neptune are right at the top of your chart in a retrograde and in a brutal opposition with Mars, just into your 4th house, your emotions are likely to be much more powerfully triggered at this time. Obviously, all lunations are something that Cancer people feel very strongly. But if you have been trying to make your mind up whether a job you're in at the present time is the right one, whether there needs to be some kind of redress around shared resources, whether you need to move money around to squeeze more from your assets, whether you are thinking of going for a tax rebate or changing your pension situation, anything that you're looking at this present time needs to be with a great deal of care. Now, with Saturn right at the top of your chart, if you are finding the demands of your work or a particular line manager quite difficult to deal with, the one thing you can use with Saturn in the 10th house is to talk to someone very experienced who can give you some excellent advice. And if it is around a big purchase, big ticket item that you're considering, or trying to find ways to economize, or if you've got a business idea that perhaps needs a little bit of experience to bring it forwards, this is a great time to seek that professional help. They may not tell you exactly what you want to hear. You could even feel a bit resentful with Mars in an opposition with Saturn, but there could be some very important truths that are shared with you. Now, the other part of this equation is Black Moon Lilith. You may be finding at the moment, particularly if you're single, there's someone around you that you're finding very, very hard to not think about. And it's possible that you're being drawn towards this person. If it is someone that you know professionally or perhaps through your everyday family situation, the thing that can help you to manage this desire is to ask yourself this simple question. Do your values align? Because if they don't, as long as you have realistic expectations about what this could be, for example, it could be a passionate affair, and that may be what you both want, but not necessarily a full-time relationship, well, Black Moon Lilith could work for you. But if you're getting caught up in something that takes you away from a relationship or a situation which preserves your independence or preserves your peace of mind, just be mindful that Black Moon Lilith could be a little bit of a mischief maker when it comes to intimate desire. So Leo, if we go back to the end of last year when Mars burst into your sign, I know he tracked backwards into Cancer, but emerged back into your sign on April the 18th. That gave you a lot of impetus to be brave and bold, to engage with things that really inspired you, that you could feel passionate about. More recently, with the Sun in your sign, augmented by Mercury, another opportunity to ignite the things that are really gripping you. But Mercury's retrograde may also have shown up things that were slowing you down, or perhaps needed to be reformulated in some ways. And I think it's likely that you've been very much caught up in trying to work with the things most immediately important to you. So the full moon in your opposite sign may mean that someone close to you has felt somewhat left out, maybe even a little bit excluded. But it's very important, if that has been starting to show up, that you do reach out and try to get the lines of communication open. Now, around points of principle or a contractual matter with Saturn and Neptune in retrograde in your 9th house, but in an opposition exactly with Mars as this event happens, it is also possible there could be some fractious discussions, particularly if you feel that you are keeping someone informed, but they're not actually investing in what you want to do. That could be a partner. If you're trying to do something that's creative and imaginative, and they're a bit tuned out, even a bit moany because of the time and effort you're putting in, that could also cause some issues. So the balance between what you need to do for you and where you need to connect to others, that's the pivotal point of this event. Now, of course, Black Moon Lilith is in the mix as well, so there may be some emotional or family issues around the balance of power, or who does or contributes what, that can also come more openly into view over the next 2 weeks. But I think the main thing is to understand that someone, whether you feel they're right or wrong, may assume that you've been too preoccupied, or it may seem to you someone's lacked the support you've really deserved. So Virgo, if we go back to November the 19th last year, the tiny but hugely influential Pluto moved into your 6th house for its 3rd visit, but this time for a much longer period of time. Now, Pluto on this event is being activated by Mars and also Uranus. And that's pushing you in a way to think about how you earn a living, your life routines, your approach to things like fitness, diet, exercise. And if you work in an environment which is quite demanding, and you may at times feel taken for granted, one of the other complications of this particular full moon is that Mercury, your ruler, is located in a very fragile part of its journey, the 12th house, but still in retrograde. So Mercury retrogrades, we know, can lead to errors, oversights, glitches, technical problems, but also in the 12th house, it may be that something's being discussed or thought about, but not being shared with you. Do be aware at work. The demands there can be very strong, but people won't necessarily articulate some of their dissatisfactions they may have with your approach. They can do it through talking to other colleagues or perhaps a line manager. So there may be some backbiting and bitching over the next 2 weeks, and all of that can have a very draining impact upon you. And with Mars in an opposition with Saturn and Neptune, if there's a lack of balance in your home life, someone else isn't doing as much around the domestic chores as you, that can grind your gears. If finances are not quite as you want, and you're not being rewarded as much as you feel you should be, you're not getting paid to work overtime and stuff like that, all of this can pile into have an impact on your physical health, which is the 6th house, but the driver could be some of that psychological energy too. Now, with Black Moon Lilith in the mix, it wouldn't necessarily be such a bad thing to have a little bit of an impish chat with someone who understands all these politics around your situation, but you know you can rely upon, because they may actually give you some very arch advice of how to deal with this. But if you do work in an environment which drains you, you don't really like the people, it's not very fulfilling, it's not very well paid, I think you should push yourself over the next 2 weeks to try to find a new role. And when it comes to balancing your emotional, psychological and spiritual energies with the physical realm, making sure you're getting lots of sleep, eating the best nutrition you possibly can, cooking from scratch, trying to squeeze in some more improvements in a graduated way, 5% here, 10% there, can all make a big difference. But something you may have been rather attached to over a long period of time in terms of your life structure could be right for a change, you know, Virgo. So Libra, for you, the full moon is in the 5th house, which is about your personal goals. But if we go back to the new moon in Leo of the 24th of July, that appeared to be so bright and radiant in terms of your long-term plan, your social interaction, your network. It's just that Mercury has been inverting through much of that period, so there probably have been some snags. You may find that a friend is very demanding over the next couple of weeks. It may be around your love life. Things don't run quite as sweetly as you would like. Maybe if you have children, their needs or demands can also impact on you. And with Black Moon Lilith in the mix in your 2nd house, that can be in Scorpio about desire, but it can also, the 2nd house, we want it now. So if you are tempted to pursue a particular line of investment, speculation, the 5th house can be about that. I'd really make sure that the information you're basing any moves upon is really solid. Now, of course, the other part of this equation is Mars, newly arrived in your sign, but in a crunching opposition to Saturn and also Neptune. If you don't feel that you're getting the right responses, the respectful responses to what you require in terms of your boundaries from other people, it doesn't have to be in your love life. I feel that could give you a desire to break free and be more independent. But if a relationship really has truly been bumping along the bottom, it may be quite hard to maintain it through this particular full moon. But remember, if someone does leave your life, it's because they're not meant to be in your life for the long term. So Scorpio, however much you're wanting to focus on your career, your ambitions, your goals, your worldly interactions, perhaps local activities where you may volunteer, something around the home or emotional sphere could be an inhibiting factor over the next couple of weeks. In fact, since your modern ruler Pluto moved full-time into Aquarius in late November last year, slowly but surely you probably have been diving deeper, trying to understand some of the roots of your life, maybe right back to those messages that are given to us all when we're very young, trying to decode them. You may have experienced some very powerful scenes around family affairs, or perhaps around your neighbourhood or immediately around you in terms of neighbours. But this particular full moon is also linking to Black Moon Lilith in your sign, but has your traditional ruler Mars locked into the 12th house in an opposition with the harsh energies of Saturn and the draining, dreamy vibe of Neptune. So I think this is quite a complex full moon for you this year, and something that you're desiring very, very strongly, maybe in some ways will have an impact on keeping that balance between home and work. And maybe as it's to do with some elderly parents that need a lot of your support. Maybe it's to do with young children, and all of this could interfere with that core desire you have. But I feel that with Mars in your 12th house, this could create quite a lot of resentment on your part if you feel that other people are stopping you from going for what you really want to achieve, and that could be a golden prize. So I think the best way to deal with the next couple of weeks, and this is critical, is to stay ready to flex, because if you take a very fixed stance, that can create a lot of tension in itself. So if someone sees something very differently to you, however challenging that may be, just flex with it a little bit, a bit like a suspension bridge, because that can release some of the tension. And most of all, try to keep those lines of communication open. I think another thing that could happen on this full moon for you, Scorpio, is if you do work in a job, or you work in a corporation or a big business where it doesn't really share your values, you may have something to really think about over the next few weeks. Getting in touch with what's really important to you and how you want to present your face to the wider world is something that may need urgently defining. Sagittarius, your appreciation of the big picture of adventure, independence, travel is the stuff of astral law. Now Mercury has been in retrograde in the part of your chart which has an acute appreciation of those areas. So if you have been moving around recently, there might have been some snags, but equally Mercury's retrograde may have pushed you to rethink some plans, especially around higher education, maybe around professional qualifications, perhaps around a contract that you've been waiting patiently to discover the outcome of that. Now, this full moon occurs in the third house, which is everyday communication, but it can also be to do with short journeys. So it's possible, particularly with Mercury retrograde, that some snags, if you are heading off anywhere, are possible over this next 2 weeks. And if you're going away with some friends, perhaps in a group situation, with Mars in your 11th house, which can be jolly, it's a great place for Mars really, because Mars can let go of its need to be, if you like, at the very centre of the attention. It can be more collaborative, but it may be that someone's viewpoints or attitudes or philosophies or just way of expressing themselves can really grind your gears over the next 2 weeks. So I think it's very important to understand you have a natural need for physical space, but also if you are around people that you feel don't get the big picture, maybe gossip a bit and maybe have a bit of a shorter view of the way life is, that won't necessarily work for you so well over this next 2 weeks. So the one thing you can do is control your movements. So if you are heading off anywhere, I think meticulous planning is important. But with Black Moon Lilith in your 12th house, I think something's going to come up over the next fortnight. A piece of information, a viewpoint, an insight, perhaps a secret is going to be revealed. And it may be around a romantic relationship, to be honest. And whereas you might be someone who's quite easygoing ordinarily, if other people have different views to you, somehow or another, that's just going to be that much harder to bear, I feel. So Capricorn, I feel this full moon can see you reviewing domestic finances because of Saturn, your ruler, being in your 4th house. The 2nd house full moon can be about everyday money. The 8th house, where the Sun and the retreating Mercury is, that's where we're heading, but it can also be where we share resources. Now, Black Moon Lilith in the 11th house suggests you could be tempted by a side hustle. A friend may have an idea. There may even be a friend that takes your resources or your generosity a little bit for granted. But I think that domestic situation is important. So if you do have someone in your household who doesn't tend to make quite the contribution they should do, you could find that particularly frustrating now. And because of Mercury's retrograde, it may be easy to say how you feel, but more difficult to get them to comprehend. So what does one do? Well, I feel your great gift is your realism. And also when you do your research, you tend to do it cautiously. So that more cautious side of your nature, I think, shows up on this particular event. And remember, with Pluto now having moved into your 2nd house for the longer term, ever since last November, for the 3rd time, something's shifting around your values, around what you see as being important, the foundations of your world. And that shift in values can also feed into certain relationships. But if someone's not really meeting your expectation, with Mars high in the sky, if you need to be much more outspoken and forceful in letting them know that that's not acceptable, I feel you will find your voice during this fortnight. So Aquarius, the full moon in your sign, particularly with Pluto in occupation, forging an amazing link to your 2 rulers of Saturn and Uranus, suggests you could be a little bit more militant if you don't feel that the give and take in a relationship is quite what it could be. But if you're negotiating something, your frustration can reach boiling point on this particular full moon because of Mars in the 9th house, very much to do with philosophies, in a direct opposition with Saturn and Neptune in your 3rd house. So if you rush something through getting fed up about waiting for someone's response, I don't think that's the right strategy. What is important is that you do have an opportunity to try to articulate what you need from situations with as much diplomacy as possible. Now, because Mercury's retrograde in the 7th house, you may be waiting for some information that you could see that someone's reluctance to share it may be somewhat personal. But it may be down to things like holidays, schedules, waiting for other people to feed in a point of view. So don't necessarily think the worst if you're not getting updated as quickly as you would like. But in a romantic dimension, for sure, with Uranus in your 5th house, if you sense that your love life at the moment is just not stimulating, exciting enough, you don't really have a rapport in terms of ideas or ideals, that can show up. And for some Aquarius people, they may feel that the only outcome is to take back control of your particular dominion. And that is something you can do with a 1st house new moon, but I just wouldn't rush it. So it's just evaluating things carefully, not pushing on conversations, because I think generally people are going to be getting quite frustrated on this particular full moon over the next couple of weeks. Also, when it comes to your professional hopes, Black Moon Lilith can make you especially lusty to have a breakthrough. And sometimes when that's the case, that's when we try even harder. What I would suggest instead is setting your intentions and then cracking on with the things that you can influence and just see how things will turn out that way. So Pisces, one of the most admirable things about your sign is how much you can give. If you're inspired or you feel someone touches you emotionally, the compassion that you can give to people is phenomenal. But also, you're the person who will cover for other colleagues' shifts. You're flex, you're mutable. But there is a point, a tip point, where you need to consider whether your welfare is being met. And that's what this full moon's about. Because recently with Mercury retrograde, some details may have been an issue. Something may have tripped you up. It may have been that you've tried your best, someone didn't tell you the whole story, and then maybe other people's opinion of you seems, as you see it, to have been clouded by that. So there may have been some politics. But if we take it back to you, particularly with Saturn and Mars, the two malefics, in a crunching opposition, but along with your modern ruler Neptune, are you really valued for all that effort, that sacrifice that you're putting in? Because if the answer is you don't truly feel valued, what can happen? You can start to erode your sense of self by being so endlessly giving. So I think what you're being asked to do over the next couple of weeks is give yourself the permission, particularly with Black Moon Lilith in the mix, in your 9th house of travel and escapism, to actually have some time off, to do something that you enjoy, to not feel guilty about that, to let other people steer the ship for a while. It actually could be incredibly liberating. And also, if there is a situation, and especially at work or maybe domestically, where people are taking you for granted, it's now time to put your fin down and say enough. You know, the part of you that can go to the opposite end of the spectrum, remember you've got two fishes going in different directions, when you can be very cool, detached and scrutinizing when you're not happy, I feel you need to swim towards that a little bit over the next couple of weeks and find a midpoint so you feel that your welfare, physical energy and stamina are being nurtured. You're also looking after the sense of value you have for yourself by people appreciating in a quid pro quo way what they pay you for the effort you put in. But don't be endlessly given. You can't pour from an empty jar. So it's important to just nurture yourself over these next 2 weeks.